An almost unbroken 50 years of deficit spending has finally brought us to a time of reckoning.
We're not cutting the deficit just because experts say it's the thing to do or because it has some intrinsic merit.
We've come to a turning point, a moment for hard decisions.
We have to cut the deficit because the more we spend paying off the debt, the less tax dollars we have to invest in jobs and education and the future of this country.
We as a country are living beyond our means. As a result, we have created a huge national debt, more than we've ever had before, and it's growing every day. If we allow this trend to continue, the interest alone on the national debt will become more than the nation can afford. We're fast approaching a situation that is simply unsustainable.
I would argue that the most serious threat to the United States is not someone hiding in a cave in Afghanistan or Pakistan, but our own fiscal irresponsibility.
Thank you for coming and attempting to depress us. I think mission accomplished.
We got to get serious.
Is it possible? Can we win against this money thing?
We can win if the young people get engaged and involved, because they're going to pay the price and they're going to bear the burden if they don't.
We're in a big hole, my generation at least. And so the only way I can look at it and think to myself is that we've got our parents and grandparents trying to fix a problem that's really going to affect us.
My generation might be the first generation that won't have higher living standards. The living standards might actually go down.
Now the deficit is so large and the interest we pay on that deficit is so large, and we're going to other countries to borrow. How did we get ourselves in this mess in the first place?
The reason why we find ourselves in this situation is pretty straightforward. As a nation, we're spending a lot more money than we're generating through tax revenue, and we're borrowing money, much of it from other countries such as China, to pay the difference.
It's really eroding our national strength and eventually will affect people's standards of living. Debt and deficits really are about more than just numbers. It's a real question of the ethics of buying now and sending the bills to your children.
Every household, every individual should accept the responsibility as to how much they're going to spend, how much they're going to generate. That we as a citizens, we do that on a daily basis. I think the government ought to do that very similar fashion.
Most government revenues, of course, are generated through different kinds of taxes. Most national spending, meanwhile, goes to support a wide variety of government programs. First, there are a large number of programs that Congress votes on each year for things like transportation, education, foreign aid, and defense. Then there are several sizable programs, notably Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. These are called mandatory programs because they are funded automatically each year to provide benefits to all individuals who qualify based on age, income, or disability. On top of all that, interest on the federal debt must be paid each year. Now here's the thing that's worrying many experts. In 2008, the huge baby boom generation will begin to retire, and spending on those big mandatory programs will begin to balloon.
The baby boom generation is about 78 million. It's about twice as big as the previous generation.
The tsunami of spending associated with the retirement of the baby boom generation is right on the horizon. When boomers retire en masse, that will represent a sea change in the federal budget, in the workforce, in the economy, and we are not prepared.
Soon, there will be only 2 workers paying taxes for every person who retires, whereas in 1960, there were 5. Our situation thus stands to get worse quickly unless we, as citizens, begin to face up to some tough choices now.
Now, the first choice that I'd like to point out is that we could, as a nation, continue on the same path that we're on today. And basically that path is do nothing about the long-term costs of these programs. Now, no one that I know is seriously proposing to do that, yet unless we have serious discussions about what the options are across the country, this is what we're tacitly endorsing.
You're going to need voters to say, well, wait a second, that doesn't quite make sense to me. You want to give me a tax cut. You want to give me a prescription drug program. You want to fight a war. And you want to do all these other things. Now, we don't have to pay for any of it. That doesn't quite add up. That wouldn't add up in my family, and maybe that doesn't add up for the government. We are going to have to raise taxes, or we are going to have to reduce spending. And because the problem is as big as it is, we're going to have to do both. That's just the reality.
Deciding on the right steps, the ones that will be both effective and fair, will require an honest national dialogue on Social Security, healthcare costs, government accountability, and other tough issues. And because all but the most courageous politicians are afraid of these subjects, the conversation will have to begin with citizens.
What specific types of recommendations for tax increases and benefit decreases would you recommend?
When do you start to, as an individual, decide to make a difference in changing a system? And it's going to take the nation to change the healthcare system.
In my view, you either fix it now or you wait for the train wreck. And that's not, in my view, acceptable, because when the train wreck occurs, it's going to cost a lot more.
We can't put this off and say, well, the politicians will deal with it. It's not just the politicians, it's what we do as American citizens.
As voters, we all contributed to allowing the problem to go on for as long as it is. We all have to take some responsibility for fixing it.
The public themselves has to engage and say, you know, it's my responsibility to get involved in this too.
We immediately need to start taking the necessary steps towards improvement and solving the problem before it simply gets too far out of control.
We want to grow, and we want this to be the best place because we live here. This is ours.